Everybody? Okay. We all set? We good on camera? Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you all very much for coming out tonight for the South Walton County Parking Needs Assessment. Let's go ahead and get started right now. We expect some folks will continue to arrive over the next few minutes. There was a bit of a backlog at the gate. So if you have an open seat next to you, you don't mind kind of consolidating. Let's leave maybe the outsides for folks to slide in on. It might make things a little bit easier. This is going to be our agenda tonight. Hopefully you all received a copy of that from the desk outside. If not, we can bring some in and share that with you. We'll very quickly go over welcoming comments and some introductions of our key personnel here tonight. Administrative items I'm going to go over, which is going to be very important. It's going to kind of set the groundwork for everything we're going to be doing tonight. I'll go over the purpose and the scope of the study, go over some very quick definitions so that everyone's understanding the terminology that's being used. And then frankly, that third from the bottom point, the one that says presentation, that's what tonight's all about. That's the meat of what's going to be discussed here with the parking needs assessment. And then finally, the part that I know a lot of people are waiting for, and that's the opportunity to provide public comment. We're going to try to do all this in 2 hours or less. And I appreciate everyone's assistance in getting us there. My name is Sal Najumian. I am with the Matrix Design Group, and I'll be your facilitator this evening. I'm a sub-consultant to AvCon, who was hired by the county to actually conduct this parking needs assessment. By way of introduction, we have several Walton County leaders here with us tonight. From the Board of County Commissioners, we have Commissioner Bill Chapman, Commissioner Kenneth Pridgeon, Commissioner Sarah Commander and Commissioner Cindy Meadows are all with us here tonight. We also have our County Administrator, Mr. Larry Jones is here, the TDC Executive Director, Mr. Jim Bagby, Chief Talbert from South Walton Fire District, Captain Mike Howell, Walton County Sheriff's Office is with us as well as numerous other members of the Walton County government. With me from the consultant team are Ms. Tanya Nation. Tanya is going to be talking to you here in a few minutes, going over the study in detail, and Mr. Lee Lewis with AvCon as well. So that's our team talking to you tonight. Administrative items. First off, hopefully everyone's registered their attendance. This is a public meeting, so we'd like to have everyone sign in. If you haven't already done so, there are signed-up sheets outside for you to do. Meeting protocol. I'm going to spend a minute on this. We recognize completely that parking is a very emotional issue. The only way we're going to make it through the next 2 hours is with mutual respect. So respect for each other, respect for the topic, respect for everyone's time. I will ask for that as we go through the evening, and I hope we don't get into a situation where we have to remind ourselves of that as we go through the public comment session. But please, let's keep that front and center. This is a listening session. And for those who have not been to a listening session, what that means essentially is a presentation will be made. That's going to be Tanya's portion of the presentation. And then an opportunity will be provided at the end for the public to come forward, each and every person in this room, if you so choose, to make comment about what was discussed. We are up here listening. We have recorders. We have multiple recorders going. We'll have physical recording going. We have the giant board over there that Mr. Lewis will be taking notes on. We have a laptop that people are typing up feverishly. And most importantly, we have your county leadership that's sitting here listening to your thoughts as well. Your comments that are made based on what's presented in the study are going to further inform the study and help with the analysis as it moves to the next section. What tonight is not is a back and forth public debate. So it's not a time to answer questions. It's not a time to get into a volleying session between elected officials and yourselves. I'm running the meeting. If you have any type of question or whatsoever, then that's something I'll be fielding. But ideally, this is where you'll give us your comment. And if you're concerned about something, that's fine. We exactly want to hear that. We want to capture that. And if it comes in the form of a question, I'm going to ask you to rephrase it in the form of a statement so that we can take that statement and then follow on with that statement and ensure we get you the answer. If we get anywhere near what we expect in this room, I stop counting at 50, but if we approach 100 people at 3 minutes apiece, we'll never get through the evening. So that's why it's a listening session. This format works quite well. As I mentioned, your listening board up here of your county leadership, they are actually hearing this presentation as well for the first time tonight. So they're also not in a position necessarily to comment on some of the content. We are just rolling it out for the first time. Based on the outcome of our session tonight, based on the kind of comment that we gather from you, both in cards that you tell us about, as well as the email follow-on comments that you can provide up to us. Those instructions are also on your agenda. We will modify our findings, we will adjust the report, and from that, your county leadership has agreed to do follow-on meetings that will be broken into more of a community subsets. And at those sessions, there could very well be back and forth dialogue. Time and date of those meetings are to be determined. I keep referring to comment card. That's what this thing is right here. If you did not receive one on the way in, and at any time during tonight's presentation you would like to make a comment, and the only way you can make a comment is if you fill a card out first, please raise your hand, and Mr. Lewis will come to you, give you a card, and he'll collect it from you when that's done. We're going to use a very simple first in, first out system. So those who have already filled in cards and handed them back to Mr. Lewis are already on a stack up here, and I will address them in the order in which they were handed to me. Again, as I mentioned earlier, please state your name, address, and speak clearly into the mic when you come up. I think here we say speak loudly. Clearly is better than loudly. Shouting will not get you any extra attention. I mentioned the email way, and I guess the last comment on this, whether you're here representing yourself, whether you're representing a community, whether you're representing a group, the same 3 minutes apply. And then for the sake of time, and again, that respect comment we talked about earlier, if you hear your comment made by somebody prior to you, and you've already got a card in the system, you are by all means welcome to still come up and voice your comment or your opinion. But please, you don't necessarily need to go through all the same detail. You could say, same as Mr. Smith or Mr. Jones said, I echo that or whatever. We will capture that, and we'll make sure that that moves on. When we do get to the public comment section, it'll be a relatively simple format. I will call the speaker up, then I will also call the speaker that's on deck to be ready, and then the speaker that's on double deck. So basically, we'll have 3 stacked ready to go so that we can move the process along and get everybody out of here at a reasonable time. And finally, I cannot emphasize strongly enough, again, the respectful tone that I asked in the beginning. I'm going to be standing up here with my little timer asking everyone to stay on. I'll give you a 30-second warning at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Recognizing, again, this is a very important topic, and I think you'll understand as we go through the presentation why we're putting the comments at the end. I think hopefully we'll answer a lot of your questions as we go. Okay, now, purpose of the study. Very simply, parking is limited. Public parking is limited in many, many areas out there. Everyone is aware of that. That's why everyone's here tonight. The biggest issues, of course, are safety related. We have safety concerns out there along both scenic 98 and along 30A. Law enforcement access issues, emergency vehicle access, pedestrian and bicycle safety, of course, are very high on top of the list, and line of sight issues that are created by people parking in no parking zones, which actually then create the 3 things that are above that. Another issue, obviously, is homeowner egress and ingress, many instances of people not being able to get into their own homes. And the purpose of the study is to identify areas or alternatives to address not just the current situation, but where we need to go from here. This is very important. This is the scope of the study. The study limits are scenic Gulf Drive, of course, in Walton County, so starting from the Okaloosa-Walton line, and then 30A. The scope of study, or what we were asked to do by the county officials, was inventory current public parking facilities, which Tanya will discuss with you shortly, identify future public parking opportunities that might be out there, improvements that can be made, evaluate the no parking policy, consider remote parking options, develop a budget for these potential improvements, and then ultimately make a recommendation to the full Board of County Commissioners. So again, we're not at that point yet. This is a necessary step in order to get to that final bullet on this slide. I would argue this is just as important as to what I just said, and that's what's not in the scope of study. Design or construction There was nothing in here where we're actually looking at the details of what it's going to take to put in another lot or a parking garage or anything like that. That's not part of this discussion. No traffic or transportation studies. We did not do turning vehicle counts, transportation counts, or anything like that. Here's a point that I think is going to probably resonate with some people. This is the evaluation of private off-street parking requirements per Walton County's Land Development Code. That is not part of this. The private portion is not part of this study. Public parking is what we're talking about tonight, and it's a foundational element to the overall parking issue that exists along the 30A corridor. And we're going to be focusing on public. No environmental studies were done. That's a whole nother level of effort. And finally, areas like Sandestin, Watersound, Rosemary Beach are not in this discussion. We're talking about right-of-way or right-of-way associated with those developments. We actually put a couple acronyms on the previous slide already, and I apologize for not putting this slide up first. A couple of the acronyms that we had already used were LDC, that's Land Development Code. We used ROW, that's of course right-of-way. The other acronyms that you're going to see through Tanya's presentation are RBA, which is Regional Beach Access. Essentially what a regional beach access means is something that's intended for automobile arrival versus pedestrian or bicycle arrival, and typically you would find restroom facilities at an RBA. Conversely, an NBA, a neighborhood beach access, is one that is designed to be approached by foot or on bike. Typically find bicycle racks, and you would not typically find restroom facilities at an NBA. DRI is the development of regional impact. Those were the Sandestin areas that we referred to on the previous slide. And then finally, the focus area, and there's going to be 11 areas that Tanya's going to step you through here in the next couple minutes that break down that entire corridor and Scenic 98 into digestible pieces. Okay, well, I've mentioned her name a number of times, and she's the one you've all been waiting to see and hear. So Tanya from AvCon is our engineer who actually went out and conducted the needs assessment. As I mentioned earlier, she's going to start at the Okaloosa-Walton line and work her way west to east through these 11 focus areas. And then after she's done, we will move into the public comment period. And again, I will remind people that the cards are available at any time. If you hear something that piques your interest, raise your hand. Lee will come out to you, give you a card, and we'll continue on through our session. So, Tanya? Hey, one person clap. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Nice to meet you all. See here. Well, like Sal said, we're going to be looking at 11 different focus areas. We're going to work from west to east. So we'll be starting with Scenic Gulf Drive. We're going to look at the entire corridor. Our main focus in these areas, just to keep in mind, is centered around the public parking and associated with the different beach accesses. And as part of this, looking at, before we get into the 11 different focus areas, there are some things that we noticed as a whole. If you look at the county as a whole and you look at just public parking in general, one thing that we noticed that it rings true and clear is something that we need to look at first would be the parking policy. Today, the parking ordinance 2003-15, it is a parking ordinance that allows right-of-way parking, and unless there is a sign, a no parking sign. Now, these no parking signs are popping up everywhere now. You see them every 10 feet in a lot of cases along 30A. And so looking at the areas from a safety standpoint, the safety is the number one item when we're starting to look at, when we look at this, driveway spacings, ingress, egress. And if you take the parking ordinance and you reverse it and you make it more of a prohibitive ordinance, and where parking is not allowed in the right-of-way unless it is specifically designated with a space that's clearly identified, or signage saying parking is allowed between this area and this area, it could relieve a lot of the stress that we're seeing from a safety standpoint. Now, of course, there is the enforcement element of this, which was a level of detail that we have not addressed, but it's just something from a big picture standpoint that we ask you to keep in mind as we go forward. Now, we did provide just this is just a slide, just an example. One thing that we noticed as we did discuss with the county representatives the possibility of a no parking ordinance, there are a lot of other municipalities that are currently doing this today. The city of Naples does it. The city of Destin, you're starting to see Okaloosa County going more towards this. And it really does help define, it better helps define the areas, and there are a lot of exceptions. This is just an excerpt out of one of the ordinance examples that allows for parking in the right-of-way during events, which we know South Walton is famous for. So it does provide some exceptions, and that's something that we know that you can't just provide a blanket ordinance without having those exceptions. And that would be something that the county would have to, we'd have to really fully define before this could move forward. And these are just some different signs to show that no parking is allowed in the right-of-ways. Now, okay, we're going to start jumping in right now with Focus Area 1, Scenic Gulf Drive. Now, this area starts at the Okaloosa-Walton County line and extends over. We broke this into several different sections. This area, I believe, is 4 or 5 different slides. Just shows Scenic Gulf Drive. And the first stretch of Scenic Gulf Drive does not have any public parking associated with it. There's no beach accesses located within this corridor here. So public parking really has not been a focus. And Walton County has gone to strides to discourage parking in the right-of-way in these particular areas. So as we move forward, now once you get to the Miramar Beach Regional Access, there's quite a few parking spaces currently in this area. You're looking at about 180 public parking spaces here. Now, a lot of people aren't even aware that this is a public parking lot available to beachgoers and restaurant users, because this is a commingled parking facility in this area. But this parking lot is available. And as part of this, this area is typically at capacity during all of your peak beach times. There are some things that were noted during the study. Even in times where there's rain and there are not beachgoers, there were still a lot of people utilizing these spaces. And at different times of day, early in the morning, these spaces, they had dew on their cars. So part of this area is looking at going ahead and enforcing the no overnight parking. That's one thing that will help open up some of these spaces, because you see that a lot of communities are using it for overflow parking. One thing that's going to be proposed as part of this study in the future, which would not be immediate future, but 5, 10, or 15 years out based on demand, is possibly looking at some type of parking garage facility where you could get 75 to 100 spaces in this area. Moving forward, as you move down Scenic Gulf Drive, you start getting into areas where you have closer driveways, and this area there is no public parking needed because there's no beach accesses, and it'd be a safety concern to even try to provide some in these areas because of driveway spacings. Now, as we move further east, you'll see the Whale's Tail area. The county added 104 spaces back in about 2007 to this area. This is a good use of space. They've provided parallel parking spaces with landscape islands every 4 spaces. It does flow well in this area. They do, one thing that we did notice that's common to the Miramar Beach area is a lot of overnight parking as well. So enforcing the no overnight parking, which will open up these spaces to the public and push the overnight parkers back into their communities. Now, as you move further down Scenic Gulf Drive, part of our study was to identify any areas that that are current easements that the county has access to, or its county-owned land. This area here, today this is close to the Geronimo Street neighborhood beach access. It is utilized as a parking lot today by private beach goers, but it is a county easement in this area. This would be a prime space if we were going to add any spaces and formalize them. This would be a very good area to do that. You could possibly get about 27 additional spaces in this area. There would, of course, it would make sense to look at possibly adding some form of beach access, and the landowner here has been in discussions with the county in the past about possibly allowing beachgoers to utilize this area here. It's just one of the options that we identified. And then as you move further down Scenic Gulf Drive, there's no additional beach accesses that were really included in the study. So as we move, so focus area 1, we've identified 294 existing spaces, 27 parking spaces that could be built within the next 1 to 5 years, and then looking long-term, the 5 to 15-year area, you could get 75 plus parking spaces depending on how high the county would like to go if they opted to do some form of parking garage. But with this area, we're looking at enforcing, making sure that we enforce if the no right-of-way parking policy was adopted, making sure that we enforce that, parking in the designated spaces only, and then of course enforcing the no overnight parking. Now, as we move, now that we are past the Scenic Gulf Drive, the Sandestin was not included in the study because they do not have any public right-of-ways that were affected. So we're moving straight into Dune Allen. Dune Allen does affect, we've got several slides for the Dune Allen area. We'll start with the Highland Avenue area, Stallworth Boulevard. This area today, the Beach Highland Neighborhood Beach Access has 6 spaces. This area, there has been talk in the past of looking at trying to add parking to this area. When you start looking at the, without getting too far into the design aspect of it, when you look at the vertical curves associated with this roadway, you look at the existing vegetation, just the way that this neighborhood is set up, if you were to even try to add 1 to 2 spaces in this area, it could be a safety hazard. The right-of-way widths are wide enough, but you, with the vegetation, you'd have to significantly clear out the vegetation to have some safe parking in this area. So we did not recommend any additional parking in this area. One thing that we are going to recommend is providing signage at the neighborhood beach access, at these 2 neighborhood beach accesses, identifying the closest 3 regional beach accesses so that the beachgoers know where they can find parking if parking is not available in those 6 spaces. Now, as you move further east, we've got the Dune Allen Fort Panic Regional Beach Access. We all know this area well. This area has some of the most congested parking that you'll see. You're going to see there's a lot of parking associated with the Stinky's Fish Camp, but in addition to one thing that we noticed with this particular establishment is, and we didn't typically look at the private establishments, but when you are dealing with commingling of beachgoers and restaurant users, that becomes a challenge in making sure that the beachgoers still do have the parking spaces, but it doesn't impact the restaurant operations. So what we're proposing is, in this area, you've got 30 existing spaces. People currently park all the way up and down Scenic Highway 30A. This is a smaller regional beach access, so providing signage at this, identifying the next 3 closest regional beach accesses, but also formalizing some of this existing parking to clearly identify where the beachgoers can park, and allowing better access and clear vision triangle access so that your community, your residents can have better ingress, egress. Today, people do park in this area. There is a replat that's currently underway in this area. They've got 2 permitted drive accesses, so parking will not be able to extend out into this area because this development is forthcoming very soon. So that was something we wanted to make sure we took into consideration. In addition, this area, you can safely provide about five parking spaces on either side of this driveway. And then something to consider would be, today there is room at the Woodward Drive area to provide some 45-degree parking in that area. It would make sense to formalize that since beachgoers are utilizing it. It is, this is not a formal beach access, but one thing we did note is that people are making their way down to the beach, and so they are parking here, and this would be a good way of if just utilizing what's already there but formalizing it. Now, as we move further down, we have the West Allen Loop neighborhood beach access. It has very limited, it has 1 space available, and there's not enough room in there with driveway spacing. You cannot safely provide right-of-way parking in this area. The driveways are very, very close together. It will impact your residents if you allow for right-of-way parking in here. So we'd recommend better signage, identifying the closest regional beach accesses for both of these 2 regional beach accesses. Here you've got 6 spaces. It does remain at capacity, so if the beach goers if they are just educated as to where the spaces are further down the way, there is typically parking available as you move further east. And then this particular area, here's just a few more neighborhood beach accesses. No parking issues were noted at the time of our study. So with this area, today there's about 45 existing spaces. We've identified 45 additional parking spaces that could be formalized within the next 1 to 5 years. Formalizing them, we do have some other options other than asphalt that we'll provide at the very end of the presentation, but formalizing the spaces could be something that you could look at paving them, you could look at gravel, and then there's some other types of reinforcement that would allow for more of a sand look without having to go through the pavement aspect of it. But with this one, we definitely would recommend parking in the designated spaces only. And then also encouraging the local restaurants to utilize the public parking during the PM hours to minimize the parking issues that occur on the roadway in the evenings, whether that be through valet or just providing some form of shuttle that might help relieve some of the PM hour right-of-way parking issues that you see. And then, of course, the signage. Now, as we move further west to Gulf Place is also an area where you see a lot of congestion. Today, there's the existing neighborhood beach access, or regional beach access, I'm sorry. Here, the Ed Walton access has a total of the Ed Walton has a total of 42 spaces. That is typically at capacity. Most of the year, they utilize these spaces for the beach. They're typically, one thing we notice is that you're getting your true beach goers here. You do have existing right-of-way parking on the north side of 30A as well as on the west side of 393. What we'd recommend in this area is to formalize the parking that's currently being utilized along 393 on the east side of the road, as well as the county either looking to lease or possibly acquire this piece of land, which they have discussed with the landowner in the past. They've even leased it in the past, and formalizing some spaces in here. You could get approximately 51 spaces, and similar to what you see at some of the other beach accesses, similar to like the one at Watercolor. If you utilize vegetative buffers, you can prevent the look of a parking lot. You can prevent that, and it'll help flow better with the community and with 51 spaces, you can still meet all of your vegetative buffers and keep a lot of that natural vegetation, which is so important to our community. Now with this one, today there's about 68 spaces that are formalized. We'd recommend formalizing an additional 15 spaces and then possibly adding 51 spaces between the next 5 and 10 years. Now if the county can acquire that sooner, that may be something that they look at doing sooner, because this area is at capacity. If we want to go back, though, one thing I skipped, Shell Seekers and Spooky Lane, they're two neighborhood beach accesses. We would not recommend providing any additional parking in these two areas. The right-of-way widths do not lend for any form of right-of-way parking. You're looking at a 33-foot wide right-of-way lane, a width at Spooky Lane. And so we're just providing signage and keeping this a foot and bike access only for these two accesses. So as we keep moving forward to focus area 4, this is the Gulf View Heights area. Today there is a lot of right-of-way parking associated with this particular regional beach access. The signage is not great for this one. So during a peak beach day of, say, June, this study was conducted in June and July, and I live close to this area, so I came down here several times just to make sure that the assessment was correct. And this area was not at capacity during the times of inspection, which were during peak beach-going times. But with better signage and providing signage at the neighborhood beach accesses, you could increase the capacity or increase the usage of this particular neighborhood beach access. And then also adding some possible additional parking along Gulf View Heights Drive, making sure that there's appropriate stormwater taken care of and all the design that would need to go into it, but formalizing a few additional spaces just to help support it as the demand increases for this particular one. Now, one thing that was not we were really focused on the beach accesses, but one thing that we did notice as part of this study is that this restaurant here, during the peak hours in the PM, this area does park a lot local catch does end up parking in the right-of-way a lot. So encouraging the restaurant owner to utilize the public parking that's available to them in the PM hours can help relieve some of that, as well as encouraging them to possibly park their employees off-site. I know a lot of restaurants are doing that now just to help add some capacity to their parking lot. Now, so with this area, you've got there's 46 parking spaces that are existing in this area. We'd recommend providing an additional 20 parking spaces within the next 1 to 5 years. And then also providing better signage along 30A and possibly 98, helping to identify this regional beach access to get the beach patrons to the access and help relieve some of the demand that's currently on some of the other smaller beach accesses. Now, as we move forward, we've got the Blue Mountain Beach area. Now, Blue Mountain Beach currently, right-of-way parking is prohibited in this area. They have gone through the petition process, and as part of revising the ordinance, that would still be the case. Right-of-way parking would be prohibited unless specifically identified. So this area does have several neighborhood beach accesses as well as one regional beach access. It is one of the smallest regional beach accesses available on 30A. What we'd recommend in this area is to actually remove the beach access signage at Highway 98, but keeping the signage just local to 30A. That helps keep the people that are on 98 away from coming directly to this beach access and keeps the people that know where it is, they can still attend, they can still come, but it would, and it'll guide the people further down, further east. if we had better signage on 98 for some of the larger regional beach accesses. With this one, though, as a way to better support this beach access that is at capacity most of the times during the year, is to formalize some spaces here which people were utilizing, but in this area provide four parallel spaces as well as some parallel spaces along Highway 83. And now with this particular one, we'd recommend, today there's 22 spaces, we'd recommend adding an additional 17. But as you move further down to the neighborhood beach accesses, we would recommend no additional parking at these accesses to help, and no right-of-way parking in this area. Pushing and then just providing signage identifying the beach access further to the west, as well as the two additional beach accesses further to the east. So in this area, we've got 22 spaces with 17 additional spaces proposed within the next 1 to 5 years to help relieve demands, as well as some significant signage changes. Now, as we move further east, we're getting into the Grayton Beach area. Grayton Beach has if you look at Grayton Beach as a whole, you've got two areas that deal with public parking. You've got the public parking associated with Scenic 30A, and then you've got the public parking on Defuniak Street and Holtz Avenue. Now, as you with this area, we started on the north end, and one thing that we looked at is there's a new bike path that's going to be going in. It'll be on the north side of the roadway. It'll be pushed up right against the right-of-way line in this area. There is plenty of space to provide parallel parking along the north side of the road with, and as part of this bike path, this does not show the current configuration because it's still in flux with the bike path, and it does not show the current, they have some crosswalks that are proposed, but with the new improvements that are being proposed with the bike path, provide some additional parking here, which could help relieve some of the parking demands that you see further down. The restaurants could possibly have a shuttle service to help have some of the public utilizing these spaces, and that way we could free up some of that right-of-way parking that's down closer to the restaurants and businesses to help support some of these beachgoers as well. And this area we're proposing, today there's 10 spaces. They back out onto 30A. What we'd recommend is removing those 10 spaces, but adding an additional 48 spaces along this area with appropriate landscaping, making sure you have landscaping every 4 spaces, and then heavily landscaping the area between the bike path and the parking to help get a better, to help keep that urban feel, but as well as keep that 30A feel, keeping indigenous plants in this area. Now, as we move down further into this area, what we would suggest is this area, of course, no matter what time of year you go, it could be spring, summer, fall, this area is typically at capacity for parking. So what we're looking at is ways to just better to add additional parking, because yes, you have the restaurant and the business demand, but you also have several beach accesses currently that they're not currently being served because there's just no available parking. So by providing additional, this lot was something that's been identified several times as a potential area for parking, looking at some creative ways of utilizing this, creating a lot that has heavy vegetation, keeping some of the existing mature trees in there, but also, and not paving the lot, utilizing some sand type systems that provide support, but still keep that white sand feeling, still keep that same vibe that you're going to see in this area, and it'd be consistent with the area, but provide some additional parking to help support the Western Lake neighborhood beach access, which it gets a lot of traffic. And you're seeing a lot more lake usage in this particular area. And these two beach accesses, of course, get a lot of usage as well. Today, you're looking at, you've got about 55 formalized parking spaces. In this area, we'd recommend adding about 27 to get us up to about 82 spaces to just further add capacity. So total, we'd be adding 65 parking spaces total in the future. And this area, of course, is currently operating above capacity. So we would recommend trying to do these improvements within the next 1 to 5 years. As well as providing better signage and providing signage for the closest 3 regional beach accesses to help relieve some of the demand from the beach patrons. And then to lease or purchase the lot for a natural parking surface. Now, as you move further east, you're looking, we get into the watercolor area. Watercolor does have some right-of-way parking, but the hidden jewel is this Van Butler Regional Beach Access parking lot. This area, no matter what time of the year, this area is, this lot is not even close to capacity. You can go there on peak spring break times. You're not going to see a lot of beach patrons utilizing it because a lot of people don't know it's there. So providing better access or better signage at 98 and along 30A and providing more signage as you get closer to the beach access on both from the west and the east sides to encourage patrons to utilize this parking lot more, because this is definitely an underutilized, it's got great facilities, and a lot of locals use it, and that's where I go, so. So today, we're not recommending any changes to this area. You've got about, today there's about 120 spaces total when you combine the right-of-way parking and the beach access, and you're, most times it's only at about 25% capacity. And peak times, you're looking at maybe 50 to 60% capacity, and that is during a lot of the events. So this area, definitely just adding the additional signage would help increase the beach patrons utilizing this, as well as patrons going to watercolor as well as the seaside area. Now, as you move into the seaside area, Seaside has 77 right-of-way parking spaces, as well as several parking spaces within their community. They have a lot of private parking associated with the residences, and then the public parking in this area, it is Seaside created parking. They have a agreement with the county that allows for those 77 spaces. They have maxed out their formalized parking that they can utilize in this area. So providing better signage, pointing them to the Van Butler Regional Beach Access would help relieve some of the parking demands that you see on most days at Seaside. So today, in the Seaside area, 77 existing spaces. We're not recommending any additional spaces in this area, but better signage to help add capacity. Now, as we move further east, we're starting to get into Seagrove. Seagrove is our largest study area. Seagrove has several neighborhood beach accesses. They do have several regional beach accesses. Signage is limited to the regional beach accesses, so a lot of patrons don't know they're there. I've lived here all my life. I didn't know they were there. So this area, you've got several neighborhood beach accesses here. You cannot safely provide parking due to the driveway spacings along Scenic Highway 30A. So today there is some parking that's occurring along 395 associated with the view. This parking is somewhat formalized, but it's not. You still see a lot of patrons. Some are parking parallel, some are parking 90, some are parking 45. So formalizing these spaces so that the patrons know which direction to park, providing your parking stops, clearly defining them so that we can utilize this area, and you can get about 35 additional spaces here. With this one, you do also see a strain from the local restaurants. What we'd recommend with these two particular restaurants is encouraging them to utilize some of the regional beach access that are 2 slides away to help relieve some of their parking demands in the PM hours, because they do see a heavy parking demand. And so through the use of valet or just a shuttle service, it would really help if we could get them to utilize some of the public parking and get off the right-of-ways just from a safety standpoint. So as you move further east, this area, we would definitely recommend not providing, the driveway spacings would not safely allow for any type of public parking in this area. These are neighborhood beach accesses. They are meant for foot traffic. So keeping these as just bike and foot traffic only would be ideal, because you just cannot safely provide them in those right-of-ways. But as you move further west, you have the San Juan and Santa Clara regional beach accesses, which do have capacity. These would be the ideal places to encourage your restaurants to try to utilize some of these spaces in the PM hours. And these would be 2 of the regional beach accesses that would be placed on the signage for the neighborhood beach accesses just further to the west, so patrons know where to go. And this will, we do see that the demand will start to increase on these. Once capacity is reached, which could be anywhere from 1 to 10, 15 years, then you could start looking at, and there is still parking over here for the Santa Clara area as well as here. So once these areas are fully at capacity most of the time, then we could look at expanding into possibly looking at another regional beach access or making it a neighborhood beach access, as well as providing some additional overflow parking in these areas, which you could provide safely, but it's not recommended right away because there's not the demand right now based on our studies. So this would be something that you would look at. Here would be like your 5 to 10 year time frame, and then this would be much further out depending on demands. But one thing that was noted, there is a stormwater issue in this area, so we would recommend to the county that before they do anything in this area, they address the stormwater issues prior to providing any impervious surfaces. But anything we're proposing, we would definitely recommend providing all the required stormwater management facilities that would be required. Now, as you move further east, there are some smaller neighborhood beach accesses with no parking today. We'd recommend keeping these still just neighborhood beach accesses. There's not the availability to have any type of facilities there. And so what we'd recommend in this area is just to go ahead and provide some better signage directing them to the regional beach accesses that do have capacity. If you put 3 of the closest regional beach accesses for these 2, all 3 beach accesses currently have capacity, so that would help relieve some of that stress or demand. Now, as we keep moving further east, you got this 1 Seagrove neighborhood beach access, which we didn't notice any major demand in this area, but just provide the signage pointing them further west to keep the patrons off of the right-of-ways. Now, as you keep moving east, we've got the Eastern Lake Road neighborhood beach access. Today, there's a place for about 10 cars. The patrons are utilizing this. We'd recommend to go ahead and formalize it. But in addition to that, the demand for bike access is very high here. The bike racks cannot support the number of bikes that do access this beach access, so we'd recommend adding some additional bike racks as well as formalizing this parking. And then this is not county right-of-way in this area, so just keeping the Ramsgate neighborhood beach access as is and providing better signage pointing them to the closest regional beach accesses. Now, as you keep moving east, we've got the port property. It's an unimproved neighborhood beach access, as well as Sugar Dunes. These two areas, they are, you've got a 30-foot right-of-way here. This area, this is not a public right-of-way. There's just an easement to allow access. So there's really no ability to provide safe right-of-way parking in these areas. So we would just recommend utilizing, just keeping foot traffic and bicycle traffic for these areas. Now, as you move further down, we do the Lakewood beach access. Today, there is, people do utilize this beach access, but there's not a huge demand for it yet, so we would recommend possibly looking at expanding this. Today, there's one small parking lot right here that has about 16 spaces, and then once demand increases in this area, which could be anywhere from 5 to 10, 15 years, look at possibly, the county does own this lot. This would be a prime place for regional beach access, but look at trying to preserve the area by adding a lot of indigenous vegetation, and then also using paving methods that would be more natural paving methods by using the reinforcement and as well as with the sand cover in this area, just to keep it a little more natural and more true to what you're currently what you would typically see out there today. So for this particular area, you've got 128 existing spaces. We'd recommend adding 45 parking spaces within the next 1 to 5 years, and then a potential of 63 spaces in the next 5 to 15 years. Providing better signage at 98 and 30A for your regional beach accesses, as well as at your neighborhood beach accesses to help lessen the demand in the right-of-ways, really help keep things, keep people out of the right-of-ways, and then, of course, encouraging the restaurants to utilize some of the public parking in the PM hours to help lessen the demands in the right-of-ways in these areas. Now, as we move further east, we've got the Seacrest area. Seacrest, today there's no regional beach accesses in the Seacrest area. There are a few neighborhood beach accesses. There is some right-of-way parking that is occurring. You could look at doing you could do parallel parking right off of 30A in this area, but there is enough space to actually have a access drive come off with some parking spaces here, and then still have room for some vegetation to help, just to provide a better buffer between some of these spaces. But we'd recommend keeping them at just a parallel parking space. And in this area, you could get about 12 spaces to help better support this neighborhood beach access, as well as the Seacrest neighborhood beach access here. And then you could probably get about another, you can get another 8 spaces in here as well. So this, in Seacrest today, there are no spaces. So if the ordinance did go to a prohibitive nature, it would be definitely important to add some future spaces. You can get about 20 spaces in this area safely. Right-of-way parking has started to become more of an issue in this area. Right now, you're not seeing as much of an issue as you are further west, but I do anticipate as you start pushing people further east with the signage, we will start to see some increase in demand in this area. Now, as you move further east, we do have the Water Sound area, which they did not have any regional beach accesses or neighborhood beach accesses or public parking, so they were not included in this study, as well as the Rosemary Beach area. Rosemary Beach, they have no parking along 98, and their beach accesses are private beach accesses, so they were also excluded from this study. Now, so the next one that you come to would be Inlet Beach. Inlet Beach is there are several neighborhood beach accesses in this area. Inlet Beach has one regional beach access, which has 120 spaces. And during the peak summer months, it does not see much use at all. So much better signage at this area. So we would not recommend providing any additional parking at the Wall Street or Winston areas. They already have signage directing them to the closest regional beach access, which is here. You can see that it has plenty of parking. And this is definitely underutilized. So better and more frequent signage on 98 to just help educate the public, to get them to utilize these facilities, which you have great restroom facilities, and there's 3 boardwalks accessing the beach here. And then likewise, as you move further down, we also have, there's an unimproved beach access by the shoreline townhomes, and we would not recommend providing any spaces there. You just can't safely do it, and there's already signage there directing them to the regional beach access. So with this one, we're not recommending any additional spaces at this time. They have plenty of capacity, and we're just recommending better signage. So if you look at the entire study area, today there are 985 existing improved spaces, which is a lot more than a lot of residents would even think, because a lot of people don't know where all these beach accesses are, where these spaces are, and that they are available to them to utilize. We are recommending a possibility of 254 additional spaces within the next 1 to 5 years, and then the possibility of another 189 in the 5 to 15 year range based on demand. And of course, all of this is demand generated. There are a lot of non-pervious or impervious options. You can look at pervious pavement options, such as this, where you would backfill with sand, so you can keep with that true Walton County look of the white sand, but provide parking stops and provide curbing to help clearly define the limits and provide better signage showing that patrons can park between certain areas. Instead of having the no parking signs every 10 feet, we would have parking signs clearly delineating where the public can park, even if they are unimproved areas or partially improved with lime rock, at least providing the parking sign showing where they can park, and then the ordinance be more of a prohibitive nature. And then just better signage. Signage as a whole is something that needs to be addressed throughout the entire corridor to better educate the public as to where they can and cannot park, starting at 98 and going all the way down to 30A. And then just looking at stormwater, which is something that the public has made, that we've just noticed from past studies that have been done. Stormwater is always a big issue. Stormwater, as civil engineers, that's our biggest concern as well, making sure that there is no flooding, that flooding doesn't adversely impact the surrounding areas, and the development works with what's being proposed. So stormwater improvements shall be part of each and every parking improvement that is made. And then as well as making sure that there is a focus on just making sure there's natural landscaping and vegetative buffers as part of every project to make sure that you keep with the look of the Walton County, the South Walton look, to make it fit in and to keep the community looking the way that it does today, or better.
All right, Tanya, thank you very much. That was it. That deserves a round of applause. She just did in 45 minutes would take you about 8 hours to drive. So she took you, and you would never find parking. No, she did a fabulous job taking you through focus area by focus area all the way through there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to the public comment portion of our evening. As I stated before, I'm going to restate the rules of engagement just for clarity. I will call you up by the cards I have in my hand, and at this point, I'm only holding 4 cards. So Mr. Lewis will come through, and he will get cards in order, and he'll hand them to me. I will call up the speaker, the on-deck speaker, and then the one after that. So please be prepared to come forward. Remind everybody, name and address, please, for the record. Speak clearly. 3-minute time. I have a very fancy high-tech timing device. Looks a lot like my phone, and it makes a horrible beep at the end, so please don't let me get to the beep part. I'll give you a 30-second warning as we approach the 3-minute point. As another reminder, we will be remaining afterwards. If you want to come up and have some clarity or discuss something, Tanya will be here, I'll be here, Lewis will be here. Feel free to come up and discuss afterwards. Another opportunity, as I mentioned, is on your agenda. Parking at avconinc.com is the email address. It's on the bottom of your agenda. Feel free to send us an email. Please do so by the 30th of April so that we have time to address your comments as long as everybody else is enrolled into a report for the county. And lastly, I saw a lot of people feverishly taking notes and taking pictures of the screen. This presentation will be available tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and it'll be posted on the Walton County website. I assume on the TDC website, which one? Just Walton County's general Walton County website. Okay, which is, do we have the address on that?
It is. It's at the bottom of the agenda.
Oh, it's on the agenda? Okay, super. There we go. Bottom of the agenda. www.co.walton.fl.us. Okay, so with that said, John, you ready to take some notes? Ready. Cameras are still rolling. So, and if I butcher your name, I'm going to apologize in advance. Some of the handwriting looks like mine. So we're going to start with Mr. Bob Coppage, I believe. On deck will be Lee. If you could please approach that mic at the center of the room, sir. Lee Goodson is on deck, and Alan Roberts will be after that. So Mr. Coppage, Mr. Goodson, Mr. Roberts. I'll say the next name, and sir, you are on.
I'm discussing with you the Montego parking area.
Can you please move up to the mic, sir?
Yes, I want to discuss
Thank
the
you.
Montego parking area. I won't go into the eligibility for beach restoration funds because it wasn't brought up here. But suffice it to say that that parking lot is not eligible for the beach restoration funds, okay? The Bramble Cove has 35 parking spaces. Santa Clara has 30, total of 65 currently. Maximum capacity, we go by there all the time, we live right there, is 15 to 20 cars. Even in the busiest of seasons. We're way overbuilt for that area for parking. When I mentioned this to Sarah Commander, she said, let's advertise and promote the area. And we can do that, but I don't think it's going to work. And the reason being, if you're coming down 331, you probably, if you want to go to the west, you're going to go to Dune Allen or Gulf Place. If you want to go to the east, you're probably going to go to Grayton Beach, Watercolor, or Seaside. There's plenty of shopping and there's plenty of restaurants in those areas. For the most part, those people coming down 331 corridor will not come all the way over to where we are. Secondly, if you go to the west of where we are, 5 or 6 blocks past this location, most of the people west of it have other beach accesses that are more convenient. So what we serve there is 395 to maybe 6 or 8 blocks to the west of us is where these parking lots serve. This area is predominantly a walking and bicycle area. Right. And in fact, from this property all the way to 395, there are 20 walkovers, combination public and private. And it's sort of a contained area because it's the park to the north, and you won't have a whole lot of extra growth in this area. So I think we're already over parked, if you will. The other issue regarding the Montego Bay parking lot is that the county does not own it.
You have 30 seconds remaining, sir.
Okay. Very quickly, there's some reasons why that the county attorneys may tell us that they can take it through abandonment. There are reasons I don't have time to explain why that's not going to work.
Okay.
And what our legal counsel believes that we can win that lawsuit. He also recommends we don't institute the lawsuit, that we try to work it out with the county, which is what we want to try and do. we would propose that we do bike racks on that location. And I wanted to give the commissioners some pictures of the land.
Okay, please hand those to us, and we'll collect all the information, and we'll provide that to the board as well.
Give these one
Yes, sir.
to each of the commissioners.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And we wanted to propose a bike rack over there. I think that'd be pretty useful.
Sir, thank you. And feel free to provide us any additional information to our email address if you didn't feel like you got everything in. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, next up we have Mr. Goodson. On deck is Alan Roberts, and on double deck is Kurt Tape. Sir.
Hi, I'm Lee Goodson, 141 Barcelona Avenue North. I'm also in the same neighborhood, Gulf Shore Manor, which is a legacy neighborhood that was platted back in 1932. And I wanted to compliment Tanya on what a wonderful presentation you made of taking us down a journey of 08A. And I know this is an extremely difficult task that you've taken on, and I compliment you on being able to solve a good bit of it. However, I am disappointed to see that the solution for just our neighborhood is to come and destroy portions of our neighborhood at Gulf Shore Manor. And as I stated, it is a legacy neighborhood, and I hate to see it being destroyed now by bringing parking into the neighborhood and only that select location. And it appears to me that we don't have a need for it for beach access. It appears to be that that parking is being brought in our neighborhood to solve a restaurant parking problem, which doesn't need to be brought into our neighborhood to solve a restaurant problem that's a half a mile down the road. And I would encourage you to rethink that area, because our neighborhood needs to be preserved. It is a legacy neighborhood. It doesn't need to be invaded in order to solve a parking problem from private enterprise down the street. And so I'd ask you to rethink that area and not come into our private streets and come into our neighborhood with your parking solutions for the beach access, because we have plenty of beach access parking with that regional beach access, and that's already south of 98, south of 38 there in that location. So you mentioned several times that the reason you were adding the parking was to give restaurants relief parking so they wouldn't park on the right-of-way further down the roadway. And I'd ask you to perhaps talk to the restaurants about building their own parking along their property, because they have property to do it, and they can solve their own parking problem and not bring it into our neighborhoods. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Goodson. Okay, next up we have Mr. Roberts, Mr. Tape on deck, and Miss Barbara Morano on double deck. So, Mr. Roberts, you are on.
Thank you. My name is Alan Roberts. I work for Sunshine Shuttle and Limousine, 323 Lynn Drive, Santa Rosa Beach. I'd like to thank my fellow Rotarian for getting up for me, Mr. Lee Goodson, everybody. Tanya, you did a great job there. Mr. Lewis as well. I know it's probably not so much fun standing in the heat counting parking spots. I can only imagine what that was like. And did a fantastic job with the presentation. And I'm going to echo what most people have told us in every meeting we've had with every business owner and local while we have put together our shuttle program, which is launching on May 24th. It's actually happening, everybody, so rah, rah for us. And they're all saying, basically we don't want, Gulf Drive is different. We don't want 38 to be another Gulf Drive. And looking at your proposal for 48 spaces in Grayton is a little, it's a little eye-opening to say the least, and I'm a little concerned about that. But I don't live in Grayton. I'm just speaking probably for everybody that does. And you really don't want to turn that area into another, Pompano Joe's type area. I mean, I'm just saying. And before the county acts on these type of proposals, it might be interesting to look at how much all of that was going to cost. And might that money be better invested in something else? And guess what I'm thinking? So that's what I have to say. And thank you for your time. Great job, Tanya, by the way.
Thanks, Mr. Roberts.
I'm Kurt Tape.
1 second, please, sir. I have a technical difficulty with my timer here. and I need to get the next person ready. So let's see, Mr. Tate, then Ms. Morano, and then after that will be Mr. Moss after that. And let's get our pages right. Okay, please proceed, sir.
My name is Kurt Tape. I live in Blue Mountain Beach. I have a business in Grayton Beach. I just thought consideration should be given to right-of-way parking on the north side of Defuniak Street, which abuts the state park, much like it does on the, when I say the north side, did I say north side? I mean the west side of Defuniak Street. Much, you know, as I said, it abuts the state park, much like the right-of-way parking on 30A would, which has been proposed. I'm just saying I think that could be better utilized, and I don't know if that's been taken into consideration at all.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, next up is Ms. Morano, then Mr. Moss, and then looks like John Finch.
My name is
Okay.
Barb Morano, 19 Brentwood Lane. I personally use Spooky Lane and Gulfview Access. But I wanted to mention residents and visitors are using street-legal golf carts, and that's increasing. And I just wanted that to be aware in your study, because they do not take as much room in the parking spaces. There are a number of those at Gulfview, and also with the parking ordinance, some of these carts are not legal as well. So you're having a combination of both, and those are two issues to be aware of. One, to increase street legal carts, and two, to ticket the ones who are not using the correct vehicles. Also, handicap parking, I'm sure you will utilize that as a percentage. I think people so far are being respectful of that. I always seem to find that when I have my mother with me. The other thought is Gulfview is being utilized, I feel, very much to a good point. But people are confused as to which side of the street when they can't get parking, so that would be interesting what you had proposed on one side. We personally had to use some extra landscaping at the Draper Lake Coastal Village Cabana area because it was being abused by people parking and making ruts in the road. So Gulfview is being utilized, and we are having some issues there as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up is Mr. Moss, and then again, I apologize, I think it's Mr. Finch, and then Larry, and I can't read the last name, A.N. something. Close enough. So those are the three cards I'm holding at this point. All right, so Mr. Moss, please.
Hi, Walter Moss. I'm 8 Blackwater Lane, Seacrest, Florida. And I thought the presentation was excellent, Tanya. And, you know, frankly, I don't see how you could find any more parking, you know, along the 30A area than y'all did. I mean, looking at the 1 to 5 year, you're looking at, you know, approximately a 25% increase. However, I heard throughout the presentation the word formalized, meaning a lot of those spaces are already being used and they're not necessarily new parking spaces. And so, I mean, realistically, having looked at all of the parking on 30A, you know, without buying and purchasing property south of 30A in Grayton Beach, which is not cheap, you know, we're looking at really, you know, maybe a 5% increase in cars that can go elsewhere. And my problem with that is D.R. Horton or Emerald Bay, you've got all these construction companies that are building, you know, not 5, 10, hundreds of homes in these areas. None of them have deeded beach access. And the problem that's going to create in the future, this will not solve. And, you know, you've mentioned, you know, using a shuttle, and, you know, I've, you know, gone over that with some chamber members. I participate in the Walton Chamber. But really, I think transportation and having some sort of way to move people. I mean, if there's no way to add space from Seagrove to Inlet Beach, then, I mean, you really got a problem when you've got 1,000 homes that are going to be built in between there. I mean, how many cars is that? How many beachgoers is that? How do you solve that problem? You've got to change how they get there. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Next up, John.
John Finch,
John Finch. Yes, sir.
18 Seabreeze Place, Seacrest Beach, Florida. Doesn't look like we can pave our way out of this one. It looks like we're going to have to change the culture. And there are cities that have been around a lot longer than we have. New York City is not building more parking lots. Another extreme is Telluride, Colorado, is not spending money on parking lots. They're changing their culture. They're providing transportation so people are not forced to have a vehicle. Eliminate the vehicles. Come to South Walton for our beautiful beaches, our beautiful water, and transportation. Provide transportation. Prevent the addiction. Why feed in to the addiction? They're giving us the study. It doesn't solve our problem. Let's provide transportation so if they drive here, they don't have to get in their car again until they leave. Or better yet, now they can fly here. Let's support this beautiful airport we have. Come to Walton County, fly here. We got low-cost carriers now. Take a taxi down to 08a. They've got transportation now. You guys, we are not going to be able to pave ourselves out of it. The cost that it's going to cost to acquire this land, to build these parking spaces, is a quarter of the cost that it would be to provide transportation. Not only does it alleviate the parking problem, but it also alleviates so many other things like drinking and driving. Hello, let's support the community. Let's do what's right. Let's prevent the problem. Let's don't feed into the addiction. Prevent it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the last card I have holding, does anyone else have a card to be collected? Steve, if you can grab that one. In the meantime, Mr. Larry Akers, okay. Yay, we got it.
I would just know the traffic study.
Name and address, please, sir.
Larry Anchors, 1535 Island Green Lane.
Thank you.
I'm concerned as to the aspect of the parking that addresses the impact of businesses that are already there, businesses that are permitted, businesses that are grandfathered in. Do we know the total amount of impact if we had to provide parking just for that and just for what we got now, not counting what we got in the future? And I don't know if that's been addressed, but I think there are a lot of small businesses that think that they may be the brunt of some things that could injure their way of life and injure their existing. So just want to make sure that was included.
Okay, thank you, sir. We got your comment. Okay, Ms. Markle?
Jackie Markell. A couple things that were mentioned, signage. I agree that the beach accesses that exist are not marked as a full-time residence. I didn't know that a lot of them were there too. So I think signage is really important. I live on the west end of 30A. I noticed that you didn't mention North or South Bishop in talking about the Stallworth Lake area where right-of-way parking could be added there. That's a really congested area. You did mention possibly having perpendicular parking next to Stinky's there because people are using that beach access. Well, they put a fence up a couple days ago. They put a double fence up so people are not going to be able to walk down and walk across 30A and go down that beach access that they were using. On the road, I can't remember the name, also in the Stallworth area, you talked about not wanting to add any parking there. It seems like to me that we could find some parking spaces, parallel parking spaces in that area. It's a highly utilized area. And I also don't think we can get away with just beefing up the regional accesses that we have now. I think we need to add some new ones. And I don't, I love thinking about leasing that or buying the space across from Ed Walleen, but you're going to have this mega access there. I know where I grew up, the beach was really crowded. When I came down here, I loved it down here because everything wasn't so crowded. So rather than, kind of pigeonholing everybody into these few places and have these mass groups of people, which people are trying to get away from on their vacation, I think Walton County needs to budget to purchase some Gulfront property and do it now. When I hear about the amount of development that is coming in our area, when I appreciate what you guys did.
30 seconds, ma'am.
Okay, when I hear about the amount of development that's coming in the area, when I hear about, adding 200 new parking spaces over the next 5 to 10 years, I kind of chuckle to myself, and I'm thinking, are we really preparing for what's coming? Are we going to wait till the Gulfront property that's left is so expensive that we can't afford to buy it? I mean, we got to do it, and we got to do it now.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any more comment cards to be picked up? One more. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Steve.
Hi, I'm Donna Ray at Tradewinds Condominiums, Scenic Gulf Drive. Our complex is directly across the street from Pompano Joe's. We have a major parking issue. Not only does the parking lot around us fill up, but the employees as well as the customers from Pompano Joe's are filling up our parking lot so that when the homeowners come and our guests, we don't even have places to park often. Another issue we have is right out in front of our office on Scenic Gulf. There is a right-of-way there that we have to cross to get to our 3 parking spots to pull into our office and to go check our mail. And this is, I've seen it used for ambulances and fire trucks as they need to go over to the restaurant for people. We also have had a fire there before where we needed a fire truck. And we are often having that right-of-way blocked by big 18-wheeler beer trucks making their deliveries. So I have tried to explain, if we, the homeowners and our guests, cannot pull into our property, that means an ambulance or a fire truck could not either. So we certainly need some help over there in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any other comments? Okay, seeing none, let me start first by thanking you all. Thank you all for coming out tonight and for being part of this process. I use the term process intentionally because this is not a final solution. As you all noted, Tanya has done a great job in terms of information gathering. It's step 1. We need to now take into account everything that was shared. You had your county leadership here listening to what was said as well. We'll summarize that. We'll provide that to the county. As I said, there will be some follow-on meetings that will be broken down into smaller subsections, neighborhood areas, that will hopefully facilitate a little bit more back and forth discussion that's designed in a smaller, more intimate session. The time and date for those will be shared with you. We have most people's email addresses if you share that with us. I would also like to thank our listening panel for coming out tonight and for listening to your community's concerns. And again, I know you all saw this for the first time tonight, so please feel free. You did not make any comments tonight. However, anything you'd like to share with us, please do so, and we'll incorporate that as well. And finally, to Tanya, great job tonight, and to all the people who helped out. So we will remain behind to discuss this if you'd like. Thank you very much for coming.